everybody, and welcome to episode 60 of All About African Violets. All About African Violets is musically sponsored by Ted Yoder. You can hear and purchase his wonderful music on his website at tedyoder.com. It's also available from iTunes. Hi everybody, welcome to my sunroom. Come on in, sit down, relax. Wow, what a week. I mean, this was the most gorgeous week here in Chicagoland. And today was like the perfect end of summer day. I mean, it's a little bit warmer than, it was cooler earlier in the week, a little bit warmer this week, today, and just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous day. And, I mentioned iTunes there just a minute ago. I want you guys to know, before we go any further, I understand that there is still a problem with the feed on iTunes. I'm so sorry. Ever since Blip booted me off of their server, I know that some people are getting the episodes on their iTouch, like through the app on their iTouch, but they can't get it in the actual iTunes store. And I want to thank you all for being so patient. I really thought it was fixed, so I do apologize. And you know what? I am not going to be a talking head today. We are going to go right into tips and treasures, because I'm going to take you back to Muncie, Indiana, to Dr. Jeff Smith's house again. And I think that you're going to enjoy this episode a lot. I told you last week I thought I might continue about streps, because Dale was talking last week about streptocarpus, and I decided to do that. So Dr. Jeff Smith is going to be talking to you about streptocarpus, and I gotta tell you, I think you're gonna find him to be pretty interesting. Let me know. Take a look. Hi everybody, I'm here with Dr. Jeff Smith, and today we are going to talk about some streptocarpus plants and some hybridizing and all kinds of stuff about streps. You guys have been asking more questions about them, and in addition to, you've heard Jeff talk about the species plants and some about hybridizing and some about violets. He also does a lot of work with streps.
I don't know.
You do. You're like the Renaissance man of the Gesnerian world, really, dude.
Dale Martin is the Renaissance person.
Well, she is pretty awesome. She's been on the podcast too.
Yeah.
So how did you get interested in streps?
I'm not sure I honestly remember how I got started into streps, other than running into them at shows. There was a African Violet Club that did judge shows here in Indiana when I first moved here. And I know that I probably ran into streps there with other club members having them. And it's like, oh, those are cool. What are they? How do you grow them? Kind of thing. And then that's sort of like, oh, well, gosh, there's all these different things in there, with streps and so forth. So I started growing a few streps just to have around. The thing that I had liked about them is that they're tolerant of a little cooler growing conditions than the violets are. And so were areas where I couldn't get violets to do particularly well, I could get the streps to go. So it kind of broadened your plant range, so to speak, of what could be successful. Where I really got into the hybridizing is when the first variegated strep came out. The
ice ones.
the ancestor of the iced ones, Cambridge Surprise. What was that one's name? Canterbury Surprise. Canterbury Surprise was the first one. Dale Martin bought a leaf of that and got it started. And she contacted me kind of out of the blue and said, would you be interested in having babies off of this variegated strep? And I kind of went, do I look like a fool? No.
Send them my way.
Send them my way. And I know what her goal was that I would do hybridizing with it and see if I could understand what was going on with the genetics of the hybridizing. So she sent me 2 itty-bitty little plantlets, which I got up, and then started, as they came into bloom, started doing some hybridizing on them. and eventually come to find out that they don't work like violets at all.
Oh, now that's interesting.
They don't. With most of the violets, as long as the seed parent is variegated, the offspring will be variegated.
Okay.
That works for crown variegation and for the Tommy Lou variegation. It works very, very well with that. Very easy to hybridize. With the strep, no way. Crossed on Canterbury Surprise, F1 generation, everything was green. Everything was solid green. So it obviously was
When you
not
say F1,
first generation.
First generation,
First generation
okay.
is what that genetic
Okay.
symbol is.
that's what I thought it meant.
Yeah,
I just want to be
first.
sure.
Yeah, that you got to stop me with the terms.
I know. I
here.
should have asked you that probably
Yeah, that's
before,
fine.
but that's
Stop
okay.
me with the terms because I use them, subconsciously. It's my vocabulary. But yeah, first generation on Canterbury Surprise, everything was solid green. So I'm going, okay, that tells me that the trait is not maternally inherited like it is in African violets, which means it's going to be trickier to work with. So then we did some back crosses of the F1 back to Canterbury Surprise, selfed the F1s to go to the F2, the second generation,
Mm-hmm.
and then we started getting variegation back.
Huh.
However, it came back in a much lower percentage than what it should have done. The classic genetic models would say that if variegation is a simple genetic trait, you should have either gotten like 50% variegated or 25% variegated, and all we were getting was somewhere between maybe 10% max.
Oh.
It was coming out much, much lower
Okay.
than what it should have been. So we're still not 100% sure how variegation is inherited, and it might be that there's actually more than one gene for it that all have to work together to be like a double recessive
Okay.
in order to get it back. But if you work with the variegated foliage, you can get it back. It's just in a much lower percentage than what you might have expected to get. So at the Kansas City meeting of the Gesneriid Society, that was back 91, 92, 93, somewhere in there, back in the early 90s. I took some plants out and showed, and Dale was now coming out with the Iced series,
Mm-hmm.
and she was using that information and finding the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
that it was inheriting that way. But I had some seed from some of the variegated crosses that we put up on the auction out
okay.
there. Says, okay, we've got a packet of seed, should produce about 5 to 10% variegates. Most would be blues, and some of the crosses I knew would produce some reds or pinks. So that was a kind of a hot moving item. But I'd also at that time had an opportunity from John Bogan to get pollen from a Streptocarpus species called Streptocarpus vandeleurii. Vandeleurii is a unifoliate strep. It has one big giant leaf.
Just one.
Just one big leaf.
Okay.
But it has white flowers, and it's moth pollinated, so it's scented. So that it's
Okay, moth, like you mean like a moth that flies in the air pollinates it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Like butterflies will pollinate things.
Okay.
Well, moth pollinated plants typically are white flowered and scented so that the
Oh.
moths can find them at night.
Oh.
So you use the scent to attract the moths in, and then when they get close enough, they can pick up the white as the most visible color. So this plant had the long strap-like single leaf, and it had a big tall stalk to get way up high in the air, and it had white flowers with scent, and it had bloomed in the Smithsonian collection, and John had offered pollen to whoever had wanted to work with it. So I rode off and got some pollen and then crossed it onto everything that I had blooming at the time. And one of the plants that came out of that was a plant that we eventually named, but the story is that it started off unifoliate, and then as it got older, it did go plurifoliate or had multiple leaves. But it was a huge grower, just absolutely huge. Flowers were a pink with a little bit of rose and a little bit of yellow in there, but it had scent, and it had enough scent to be noticed. So I gave Dale Martins one of the cuttings off the plant and said, grow this up if you would and see what you think. And that year at Kansas City, she entered it into the new flowering Gesneriid class, which means anything is in that class.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just, it's not limited to streps, it's everything. And she goes, if this does good, you're going to name it. And I said, okay, you know, whatever, we'll see how it does. Well, it won best of class.
Oh, great.
It surprised me to death. She goes, okay, you're naming it. So I go, well, all right, we'll call it Heaven Sent, Scent.
Okay.
So that one we named and released, and it's still out there.
Yes, I've seen that at show.
Seen it in shows, but it's out of that Vandeleurii, you know, grouping. So that was my first venture into scented strips, which was another thing that people are trying to hybridize for now. That was the only really scented plant that I got out of any of the seedlings, that type of thing. I only kept one other plant out of all of those crosses, because most of them were big, huge monsters and not particularly interesting or whatever, but I did keep one other one. And there's a story behind that one. We looked at it down on the tour. But it's one that it was blooming really, really well here about 3 or 4 weeks ago, just loaded with flowers. So I took a picture of it and sent it to Dale and said, Dale, what do you think? Is this one that I should consider registering? And she said, oh my goodness. And I said, you know, it's really huge, and I don't know if there would be any interest in another large, you know, huge scent or strep, and it doesn't have any scent, you know, so that's kind of a drawback. And she said, oh yes, you need to think about registering that. You need to get the pictures out. So I posted the pictures, and it got picked up and put up on the Facebook page for the Gesneria grouping. And the last time I looked, it had like 75 likes. And
That's awesome.
And got a lot of positive feedback. So I'm in the process of filing the registration papers now. They're filled out. I just got to get the check and the papers off into the mail, which I'll probably do this weekend.
Excellent.
But I'm going to call it Pink Elephant.
I love that.
Hardly original.
I love that. But it's giant and it's
I
pink.
mean, it's huge. It's pink. It's a nice light shell pink with a darker nectar guide in the center. But it's got that large leaf pattern from the Vandeleurii parent. And if you see that version of the taping that Annie has made, I don't know if you can get a good idea how big the plant. The crazy thing is over a yard across.
It's giant.
It's just absolutely
It's
giant. And the bloom stalks will have 20 or more
and
flowers.
the bloom stalks are way up there.
Well, they're way up there tall. I got that from the Vandeleurii parent. So it's just an absolute monster of a plant, which makes growing it a little bit challenging. I think you might have to think about a window condition or lights from all angles in order to get it, you know, to really grow and shape well. But it just, when it starts blooming, it just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes.
Yeah.
And Heaven Sent, once it's mature and starts flowering, it just keeps going with that one. A lot of the things that you would have seen in the tour are seedlings. Often I get strep seed from the GHA, the Gesnerian Hybridizers Association seed fund, and just grow out things because it sounds like it's interesting cross. So some of the coral reds came out of that. Some of those netted pattern flowers that you saw come out of that. Dale has come out with some wonderful variegated minis right now. With the polar lava is one that I really like the polar lava. So I'm trying some crosses onto that just to see if I can work with that variegation, which is a different variegation actually than the Canterbury Surprise variegation. It's a green and yellow as opposed to the green and white. And then every once in a while you get something unusual. When Annie was filming downstairs, she picked up one that, in my mind, I call tiger tail or tiger stripe because it's got the green midrib and then the white variegation on the edges of it.
It's gorgeous.
It's a foliage plant. It hardly ever blooms. It's just not floriferous at all. I think the variegation makes it too weak. But you can only propagate it from suckers or pups. It will not come true from leaf, so it's a chimera in the strep world. But the foliage is gorgeous.
Oh, it's a stunner.
Yeah, just on that one. So, you know, you get these oddball things that come up every once in a while on that. So streps are kind of a minor hobby. genetically, the flower colors in Streps inherit exactly the same way as the flower colors in African violets.
So the flower colors inherit the same way, but the foliage does not?
Yes, as far as the variegation does, the variegation is totally different.
That's interesting.
But I think it has to do with the growth form. The Streps grow differently than African violets do.
When you say they grow differently, what do you mean?
In a standard African violet, you've got the apical meristem, or the crown,
The crown.
and every produces all the leaves out in a radiant form.
Mm-hmm.
Streps don't grow that way. Streps grow in a different pattern. Even the multiflorate streps, they will grow from a leaf that then buds off several other leaves, and then it will throw a whole nother plantlet off to the side.
Yeah, yeah, they do
They
that.
do that, and that's a different growth form. And so it just, because they grow differently, and they...
See, I always just thought of that as like a sucker, like off of violet, but I understand now what you're saying.
Yeah,
That's
it's
like a
like
whole different
it's
thing.
like a whole different plant.
Yeah.
And I've even had Streps that have put roots down, and I'll get another baby plantlet showing up over here off of a root sucker.
Cool.
You know, it's like, okay, where did that come from? And I trace it back. Oh, okay. The roots went down the wicking, over the foliage, down over here, and there's a baby plant popping up. You know, it's like, okay, where, that type of thing. Or they'll sucker a little baby plant within the same pot. I'll have a little baby come up over to the side, and I'm going, okay, that has no connection to the parent plant, type of thing with that one. I grow my Streps. They'll get huge if you let them, and some of the big ones I'll put in bigger pots. But I try to keep mine in about a 4-inch max size, and I'll chop them down and restart them frequently just to keep them into a single crown.
So that they're manageable?
So they're manageable. They'll keep suckering and making multiple crowns, which makes Streps excellent for show. You can get a great big giant huge plant.
Right, because you can have more than one in a pot.
You can
for
have
a
more than
strep
one, and for
in the
Strep you can
show,
have more than one in a pot. So I had one that was called Kansas City O. That's a complex hybrid Strep that I got as a seedling.
Okay, what's a complex hybrid?
Complex hybrid means that it's got more than one species in its ancestry.
Oh, okay.
So my yesterday series would be complex hybrids, in the sense that they've got more than one St.
Your
Paulian
yesterday's
species.
violets.
Violets,
Okay,
yeah.
got it.
Yesterday's violets would be complex hybrids.
Okay.
But this one is a Strep that had more than one ancestry, or more than one Strep or species in its ancestry. But it has what they call the keyhole blooms. They're little, and the butterfly would land on it and feed right down through to a little short little stalk. But it's a little bit different appearing than the larger, deeper Strep blooms.
Okay.
Type of thing. But I managed to grow one probably a good 20-some inches across, because I had more than one plant in there.
Oh, wow.
And it had, I think we counted over 60 open blooms on it.
Oh, it must have been a
And
stunner.
it was stunning, and it got best Strep
I bet.
and best flowering gesneriate at the Ohio State Show that year.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it was neat, but but it takes a lot of space. Just takes so much space.
Well, yeah, I mean, your shelf downstairs, that big place where they are, it just, for the number of plants that you have on the other shelves, that's a bigger space with fewer plants.
With fewer
because
plants,
they're
because
so
they're
large.
just so much larger.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I'm really liking these ideas of getting smaller, more compact Streps.
Well, I know Dale does a lot with the more compact
with that
strips.
one. I think there's going to be a nice movement that way, because that'll make them very comparable space-wise to a standard violet.
Okay. Yeah,
And
that makes
then
sense.
that will be, I think, a good market, a good upcoming thing. And we've got scent with Streps that we do not have in violets. There's no scent gene
Well,
in
and we
violets.
have colors that we don't have with violets, don't we? I mean, there's yellow, which we really don't have.
Well, we have yellows and violets, but not like what we have in the Streps. The Streps have ended up being much better to work with,
Yeah.
which was interesting, because even though the genetics is the same in terms of the
For
inheritance
color,
patterns,
Yeah.
you're getting now patterns and things in the Streps that we don't have counterparts in the violets. That network,
The webbing,
the webbing of the
yeah.
color. We don't have anything comparable really in violets. And then some of the color combinations that you're getting with the yellow purples and golds, and I've seen some other really unusual colors lately and patterns like the roulette cherry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't really have anything quite like
No.
that in the violet world.
No.
So streps are showing up to be a fairly diverse group, but a lot of their hybridizing has been in the last 20 years. We've had a big explosion of hybridizing in the streps in the last 20 years.
Jeff, do you think streps are easier to grow than violets?
Maybe. That's qualified.
Yeah.
In some growing spaces, definitely so. In others, you can't keep them alive. And a violet will sit there and grow great guns. So I think it depends upon the environmental condition.
Okay.
I think the easiest way to kill a strep is to get it too wet and not repot it frequently enough. Because the root systems on those things can be massive.
So how often would you recommend, like I probably have 5 or 6 streps right now, and I came home with a couple of radars of the new ones from Sundown Pittman, and I have about 3 or 4 of Dale's, I think. I have a Texas hot chili, which was my very first strep, and I can't tell you how many of those I killed before I managed to keep one alive. I never even wanted to grow a strep until I saw that one. And now I have it again, and it's in a 3-inch pot, and it really needs to go up now to a 4-inch pot. But Dale told me she said she rarely sees it in larger than a 3-inch pot. But I've got multiple plants in there, I think is what's going
and
on.
that may be what's going on, and then you'll need to either split or move it up.
But I know for violets, like for standard violet, I want to be repotting at least every 6 months. For mini or semi, every 3 to 4.
Same schedule for
Same
streps.
for streps?
Yep,
So-
same for streps.
So for a big strep, every 6 months, smaller strep?
You can let them go longer. That pink elephant that's down there in the basement that we looked at, that probably hasn't been repotted a year,
Oh, wow.
something like that.
Okay.
Streps will take getting pot bound, but they will show stress a lot faster than violets will. And you'll see it in the leaf tips and the leaf margins. They'll go yellow.
Okay.
And one of the tricks that Dale taught me is after a leaf has bloomed, remove the old leaf. Get rid of the old big leaves.
Oh, okay.
And let the new ones come up, because that's where your next source of blooms are going to be. The old leaf, once it's bloomed, is never going to flower again.
So when you say once it's bloomed, sometimes you'll see like 2 or 3 or 4 little stalks coming up off that leaf.
Yeah, what you'll have, if you check on most of today's streps, if you look at the base of the midrib,
Yes.
you'll see a row of flower stalks.
Yes.
Okay? When they stop appearing, that leaf is done. That leaf will never flower again.
So you'll see the little, like where you've cut them off, and and if you never see any more,
if there's no new ones coming,
so the new ones would be coming. So
they'll come up in a row right there in that midrib.
So if my thumb is the base of the plant and this is the leaf, so that they can see it, and the little stems are going this way.
And they'll start from the base of the petiole,
That was my next question.
and they'll work out.
So they start down here, and so after you've cut them off at a certain number, if you see 4 or maybe 5.
The number of bloom stalks they throw up per leaf is genetically determined. It's not environmentally determined.
Oh, okay.
So they'll have a preset number of bloom stalks that they can throw up.
And so you would only know that by paying attention to them.
By paying attention.
Okay.
And for most of them, for some of the streps, it'll only be 2. Some will be 3. Some of your more floriferous streps will throw up 7 or 8. But you kind of have to watch. But once you see no new ones coming, and that last one is finished flowering, take that leaf off.
So will you see a new one coming while they're still
blooming? You'll see them in different stages of development.
Okay.
And you'll see the oldest one, the one closest to the base, will bloom first. The next one will be somewhat behind it developmentally.
Okay.
Next one behind it developmentally. The next one will be maybe just a little stub coming up.
Okay.
And once you stop seeing the little stubs, no more bloom stalks coming up. Once that last one has bloomed out, it will never produce another bloom stalk on that leaf again.
I think I have some work to do at home.
So then what Dale recommends is take that leaf off. Make room for the new plants, the new leaves that are coming up, because they'll be the source of your next round of blooming.
So would that be, when you see that, I mean, it doesn't really grow in a rosette the way a violet does, but it does have leaves around it.
Around it.
So would that be a good time to repot when you are cutting those leaves?
Yes.
And then
Mhm.
maybe then cut a few roots off like you do?
I always root prune. I always
Okay.
root prune at least half the root mass off and
That's,
put it
I
in
mean, I do
fresh
that
soil.
with violets when I'm
Yeah.
taking, when you take all those leaves off, you don't need
Mhm.
all those roots
You don't
anymore.
need all those roots. So because the plant needs to. They've got very fibrous roots. They'll totally fill
Yeah.
a pot with roots, and if the roots are pot bound, then it'll go into blooming. But if it can't grow any further, there's no stimulus for any new leaves,
Okay.
and so forth. So as it goes through a bloom cycle, and you've noticed that all the oldest leaves have bloomed out, then what I like to do is essentially break the plant down
Okay.
and take off the oldest leaves. And if I've noticed that it's pupped, where I say it puts out 2 or 3 of those new sucker
Mhm,
plants,
mhm.
I'll often either cut them off or split the plant if I want to divide it and get 2 or 3 plants out of it.
Okay.
I'll just take a knife and go through and cut through the core and split
Okay.
those apart and maybe pot them up individually.
Oh,
Or
this-
if I'm not interested in doing more plants, I'll even cut it apart and keep the better looking of the 2 halves.
Okay.
And that's what I pot back up and keep and toss
The
the
rest,
other.
the rest
Toss the
goes.
rest.
Now, do you propagate from leaves ever, or do you?
I rarely anymore. I have
Okay.
done that. In fact, if I propagate from leaves, they talk about doing the slice on the midrib
Yeah, take the
and laying
midrib
it
out.
down.
Yeah, I've done it.
Okay, I've done that. I've found that it takes longer, but you get more plantlets because every vein will give you a new plant.
Okay.
But it's hard for me to keep that midrib in contact with the growing media, keeping it pinned or propped or whatever so
Okay.
that it will root.
Right, because they say not
They-
to stick it in, just to sit it on.
Yes, and,
yeah.
and then it's like if it doesn't make good enough contact, then it doesn't. It just dries up.
Okay.
And if it's too wet, then it rots. And I have trouble getting that media
Okay.
in there. What I like to do if I'm only like if somebody sends me a leaf, what I'll typically do is take the leaf and cut it longitudinally, so that I
Okay.
get sections this way, and then I'll trim them to get V's. And then I'll put those down like you would an African
you would a
violet leaf. And then it usually will root, and I'll have, from one long leaf, I'm able to trim it into 4 or 5 sections, and then trim them back, and put those all down, main rib or mid rib down.
And do you have to make like a 45-degree cut with like an exact, like you do like a sharp knife, like a sharp?
You don't
fresh cut on
have
a
to.
violet?
You don't have to. No.
So on a strip,
No.
that's not as
Well,
critical.
what will happen is that the leaf blade that's left off to the side will have a tendency to rot. So
Okay.
what I'll tend to do is you'll have your main rib, main vein, and then what I'll do is trim out the material off to the side of one of the side veins.
Oh, okay.
So you get that branching pattern of the veins,
Yeah.
and I'll trim off any flat material that's still down there that would tend to rot. I'll trim up to the next side vein.
Up to the vein. Okay.
Up to the side veins.
Because it's not going to grow from the material; it's going to grow from the vein.
Right, it's going to grow from the vein.
Okay.
Is where that's where they always root from, and where they grow from the streps is from the veins.
Okay.
But that will give me 4 or 5 plants, which is typically all I'm after. A commercial grower like Gary probably does more of the horizontal
Yeah.
because he's more interested in the number. And you can grow that, root it in perlite, regular African violet soil. I've even done it in loose, unground perlite, or not perlite, peat moss, the fibrous peat
The
moss.
sphagnum moss.
Yeah,
like?
sphagnum
Yeah.
moss. I've stuck them down into that and rooted them right into
Oh.
that. And that works well. It's nice and airy. Keeps
Cool.
them from rotting.
That sounds great.
Kind of thing. And then we get the little plantlets come up, and then sometimes you'll get multiple, sometimes you'll get one, and just divide up to whatever you want. Sometimes I just cut off and root the whole thing because I'll want more than one sucker in the original pot to go anyways.
All right, so this question is coming. Do you have a favorite strap?
Favorite strep? Favorite strep? Oh
Poor
gosh.
Jeff. I've asked him this every time we've spoken now.
Um,
And it could be one of yours or somebody else's.
I'll mention one or two.
Okay, all right.
Maybe. I really was pleased with Heaven Sent. You know, that first hybrid.
pretty
so,
exciting, yeah.
You know, to get that one and to get the scent and get a good flower count and good color, that was exciting to have that happen. So that one's always been a favorite. And as I said, once it gets established, it just nonstop, just keeps blooming. So it's always fun to have around. I've really liked a lot of the netted pattern flowers, like Magnetosphere and some of the other ones that you saw down in the basement. I just love that contrast with the color in the veins and the white background in between. Probably those. That Kansas City O that I mentioned is a nice different strep, and I was successful at the show with it. So that one's one I kind of keep around, you know, just because it's kind of different and kind of fun. Dale's Polar Lava. I'm really liking that one. Decent bloom count. Love the color and the contrast between the red flowers. I did have the Texas Hot Chili. I have not grown that one in years, but that one was a really nice one. I really like that one.
I love it. And it fell over the other day.
Oh.
It fell right over, right off the shelf, and I'm like, holy smokes, it's on the ground. It lost one leaf.
Got top heavy, huh?
Yeah, that's why I know I have to pot it onto a 4-inch pot so it doesn't fall over again.
Now that's a good clue with
Yes.
strips. When they get top heavy, over they go. Over they go. So, but I found them, you know, pretty easy to grow. They're very susceptible to soil mealybugs. Unfortunately I've had that gamut come in, and when they get in there, they'll just destroy a strep lickety split. But the streps won't necessarily show it, and then they'll just collapse. And then when you get digging around, you realize, well, there's no roots here. Gee, funny how that goes. But the streps are really easy to grow. The main thing is managing their size, because they can get those long strap-like leaves. And if the leaf gets too long, cut it off. You know, keep it within bounds. It's not going to harm anything. And Dale's always good about telling you to take in the pinking shears, you know, and reshaping the burned edges and whatever else, and that works.
And you can
that trick.
and you can do that with a strap.
You can do that with a strap.
You can do that in a show.
In a show,
So.
yeah, I've done that. So great, you know, great trick to know.
Awesome. Well, is there any advice that you would give to someone who is really looking to grow straps? Maybe a beginner just starting?
I would say, unless you've got some of the newest small growers, compact growers like Dale's Polar Series and things, anticipate they're going to be big. The streps are going to go out and they're going to go up. The flower stalks on streps will go up higher, and you need that ceiling space, which means getting them underneath a light shelf a little bit challenging, because they'll go right up into the lights, and then the flowers will burn, be abnormal, or whatever else. So if you saw the tape of my growing area, I've got the shop lives hanging on chains so I can go up and down on height. If you have that capacity or a window, streps make wonderful window plants.
Oh, that's a good idea.
They do. They make wonderful window plants. They're very forgiving of that. And they'll take the cooler temperatures from the glass leakage in the wintertime. That doesn't bother them nearly as much. The other fun thing about streps is that if you cut the flowers at the base, you can put them in a bud base, and they make actually decent cut flowers.
Oh, I didn't know that. That never even occurred to
Yeah,
me.
they make actually very nice cut flowers.
Okay, good
So
to
if you've
know.
got them in one area and you want to cut a batch and throw in a bud base and take to work, now eventually, they'll fall off and whatever they'll detach.
Yeah, all cut flowers do.
All cut flowers do,
yeah.
but you can make a reasonably decent bud based bouquet of strep flowers.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for spending this time with us.
You're welcome.
All
And good
right.
luck with your streps. They're a lot of fun.
You guys, I'll be right back. So how about it? I mean, did you know the thing about how the leaves grow, and then how the bloom stalks come up, and after a certain point, if you don't see any more little buds there, not gonna bloom again from that leaf? I had no idea. I did not know that. So I got a lot of straps downstairs that need a little work. Because some of those old leaves need to come off and make space and room for new leaves that will bloom. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm hoping to test that theory out for myself in terms of maybe I'd have some better straps for show next year. It'd be kind of exciting. Well, let's go take a look at what's on the stands. Hi everybody, it's time to take a look at what's on the stands. Well, here in the guest room, not a whole lot going on. Here's Blueberry Sprite getting ready to bloom again, and I am going to let it bloom till we see how it does. This is Cool Blue. I think its blossoms are about done. Chiffon Masquerade, really doing well. Time to disbud. There we go. And sorry, there we go. That's better. Shadow Magic, also ready to be disbudded again. And this is House of Amani, and I'm kind of thinking that it might be a little warm up here for House of Amani. I have to look up in my stuff if House of Amani is more of a cool growing species. It might need to go back to the basement. Here's Smooch Me, Fresh Air, Pow Wow, and Gala Pink. This is almost, well, 3 of the 4 of these are Kent Stork plants. And Sima Ubeatia, Two Fisherman's Paradise, that's Optimara Hawaii. And this is another stork plant. Maybe I should move this one up so I have 4 plants on a shelf. This is Santee Sioux. Let's go take a look in the basement. Well, here's the tray that has a lot of trailers. Not all trailers, but quite a few. And this one that's so highly variegated, this is Rob's Chili Willy. Hasn't bloomed for me yet, but we'll see. And then over here, pretty just kind of hanging out. Not too much going on up on that shelf, top shelf. Take a look in here. Actually, hang on, I'm gonna be right back and I'll take the lid off so you can really get a good look today. Okay, here's the big tray, and you can see that a lot of stuff is looking pretty good. Here's our challenge plant from Carol Lee, Ma's Winter Moon, and definitely getting a plantlet there. This is that sucker I pulled off of Roulette, so it looks like maybe it's going to take after all. I really wasn't sure that it would. Here's the sucker off of Optimara, Michigan, and everybody else just kind of growing. And I'm very excited because these big variegated leaves back here, those are some of those Cajuns that I got at National, some of Belinda Thibodeau's fabulous plants. And they're sprouting and I'm excited about it. I can't wait to see them. And as you know, as it has been recently, I've got a lot of work to do. But it's probably not going to happen until after Labor Day. And let's take a look in here. Again, stuff growing, things looking good. Some species things back here. Everything so far, and some species leaves up here. So far, everything looking pretty good. So, it's down here on the second shelf. And you may notice now that these shelves down here, things are not quite as crowded as they were. That's because a few things left. This week, I've had, you'll remember that Optimara Tennessee 2 was right there, and it did not bloom true. I was very disappointed in that one because the symmetry was looking to be really, really great. Here's Laney, still blooming. Still have one gorgeous bloom on Moonrays, and over here is Optimara Yellowstone, and I'm really excited about this one. I'm kind of letting it bloom just for a while, and I'm going to disbud it and really focus on this one. I think it's going to be gorgeous as it grows. I'm going to really encourage it to get some more foliage going on there. This is Grandifolia, it's a species. And here this is Tensi, Radar's Tensi, really beautiful. And Party Pinafore, still blooming like mad. And I'm just going to walk around this time to this side. And remember, this is the one that I was very worried about. This is Radar's Magic, and it's making its own little comeback here. I'm very, very happy about it. Yay! Let's go take a look at the Streptocarpus stand. Well, everybody's just kind of hanging out here. Blue Mars getting ready to bloom. Still have one blossom there on Salmon Sunset. And everyone needs a drink. I need to water today. But everything looking fine here. Let's go upstairs. Well, here we are up in the sunroom. And you'll notice that Selena Dark Velvet is gone. I'm very disappointed. My friend Daryl Hoover had posted some information about that particular variety on his site, and I did not realize that it was actually a fantasy. It was supposed to have a deep purple fantasy, and mine did not bloom with the fantasy. What Daryl said that from his experience is it's about 60-40. 60% will bloom without it, and 40% will have the fantasy. So I was in, I think that's the right percentages. I hope I didn't flip them. If I did flip them, Daryl, let me know. But mine was in the wrong percentage. So still nothing going on here with Max Scorching Sun or Frosty Bubbles, but I'm going to give them a little while longer and we'll see what happens. Finally here, Champagne Pink starting to, I pinched out the center on this so that it would encourage it, see, to have some more crowns there. So those are starting to trail. Down here on the Gesneriid shelf, everything looking pretty good. Some yellowish leaves there on the Escananthus. Probably I need to cut that back. And Texas Hot Chili needs a drink. It really kind of drooped there. Whoa, I better do that. I'll do that right away once we're done here. And Jersey Snowflakes and Ma's Old Fashioned. Down here, nothing too exciting. Uh-oh, somebody's tilted over there. I just shifted the stand a little bit. So everybody just kind of doing their thing. Again, not liking this really tight center here on Ma's Winter Moon. And I just want to see. Okay, yeah, this was repotted in December. This desperately needs to be repotted, so I need to get cracking on that one too. It will ease back up. Just walking around so you can see things from this side. Again, nothing too exciting. Everybody kind of canted over to the side there when I shifted the stand. There we go. Everything looking good. All right, I've got a blossom stalk here. Be careful this time. I don't want to pull a leaf because this plant is looking like it's going to be beautifully symmetrical. I'm really liking it. Okay, let's go run and take a look at the big box violet. Well, here it is. It's looking a little bit off center. That's because it's blooming mostly from one side, but it is blooming again. And once again, I have left it to do its thing just because it seems to enjoy it. So when I repot it, I will take it back down and groom it substantially and let it grow for a while before I let it bloom again. But that's the look at what's on the stands today. I'll be right back. I'm trying to move us along a little bit because I didn't want to cut any of that interview with Dr. Smith because it's just, you know what? I'm like the biggest fangirl. I admit it. I love talking to him. He's so interesting. Anyway, the stands, a little different. A couple things going. You see, I'm really starting this process of culling. And boy, when they don't bloom true, it makes it very easy for me. I'm back under 100 varieties. I'm very excited about that. That's even with the leaves and the species stuff that's downstairs. It's not counting the streps though, or the other Gesneriids, so just violets. Anyway, big box violet continues to amaze me on a regular basis. And do you think I could finally get the name of Western Moon correct? You know, I keep calling it Winter Moon. I mean, I've been doing that for what, 8 months? I kept calling it Winter Moon, knowing that it's Western Moon. And then Kara Lee gives me a leaf of Ma's Winter Moon, and now I'm completely discombobulated. Well, you guys, it's time to get the bail money ready. But again, nothing going on in the next week or so. You know, it's the dog days of summer. Things are dying down. There'll be some fall shows that'll be coming up soon that I'll be able to share with you. I would like to remind you that if you have not taken the AVSA Technology Survey, I would really love for you, I shouldn't say that. I should say I encourage you to do that. You do not have to be a member of the AVSA to take the survey, and your information, your survey will be seen, and any comments and information that you share will be read, and no one is discounting anything. All views and all information, it's all valuable, and the AVSA is really looking for that info, so I encourage you to do that. Well, it's time to keep moving forward. I just really want to thank you all for being with me this week and for coming back week after week and enjoying the podcast. I do continue. I got another email this week from a woman, actually two people emailed me this week and said they've just found the podcast, and I love it that you guys go back to the beginning and watch the whole thing. I always think, oh my gosh, you must be so tired of me, because there are 60 episodes. That's like 30 hours. But it's pretty thrilling to me that you guys choose to do that, and so thank you very much. I hope that you have a wonderful week ahead. As I've said, I've got a lot of work to do downstairs. Kurt Jablonski, I can hear you saying, Annie, you need to get cracking and get that stuff repotted. I will. Probably not till September, though. Just kind of moving through these last weeks of summer. My friend the Proverbial Knitter will be here next weekend, again visiting me, and I've convinced her to actually film me working on the stands for the look at what's on the stands, because you guys always just see my hand. I'm holding the camera with one hand and kind of doing things with one hand, and I thought it might be interesting for you guys to get a look at what I really do when I'm going through the stands and I'm looking at things and I'm turning things, so as you notice this week, there's a lot of disbudding that needs to happen. But I thought I'd wait till next week so I could show you how I actually really do it as I'm going through it. Okay? So I hope that your days will be filled with all the things you love this week. Thanks for being here. Good growing. I'll see you next time.